This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Ronald Eubanks is from Dallas, Texas, where being in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people landed him behind bars for a very long time. The name of his book really tells his story. Guilty Until Proven Innocent. When a Woman Cries Rape, the real story of Ronald Eubanks.
What inspired my book was I went to prison for a crime I didn't commit. What played a big part in that was that I couldn't read and nor could I write. So I made it very easy for the justice system to send me to prison for a crime I didn't commit. So I really wanted to write a book to inspire or to help people not make these same mistakes that I did with my life. I was out one night. I met a woman and I met another guy. I met both of them at the same time. And she had her kids out. It was like 2 a.m. And he just got off the bus. And I was sitting at the bus stop because me and my girlfriend got into it at that particular day. And a guy got mad because I wouldn't give him no marijuana. He called the police and told the police that we was raping that woman. So when the police came, she told them that everything was okay, that wasn't nothing going on because it wasn't. And they separated us and they got mad because she had her 2 kids that was 4 and 5 years old out with no shoes and no shirt on at 2 a.m. So when they went to talking about calling CPS, she went ahead and said that me and this other guy raped her. But in the process of her telling them that we raped her, she gave them a false name. And the guy that called the police gave them a false name. And it was up to the justice system to get it right, but they didn't get it right. And the woman had no intention on prosecuting us because it didn't happen. She was just basically trying to save her 2 small kids from being taken away from her. But the justice system seen it a different way, so they prosecuted me and that other guy.
Did they do a test on her?
They did the test, but when it come out that she was a prostitute too. So they couldn't tell that she was raped or anything, or what they end up doing after 20 something years. See, they had her DNA and they had the DNA that was in her because she did have 2 male DNA sperm inside of her. And it took them over 20 something years, 25, 24 years, 20 years to test the DNA. And when they finally tested it, it didn't match me or the other guy. It was 2 other people at the DA match. And that's when they came to the realization that she was a prostitute. And it never even happened.
And this, you spent 20 years in jail?
Yes, ma'am. Well, altogether, I spent 15 years in prison. And I spent 10 years as a registered sex offender, walking around, and people didn't like me. They talked about me. I remember I tried to go to church and they didn't want me in there. They didn't even want me part of the church no more because they found out I was a registered sex offender. And she was basically out there saying that her husband put her and her kids outside. And I feel sorry for her and her kids. I ended up buying them something to eat because the kids kept saying that they was hungry. And by me doing that good deed, and it screwed up my whole life.
So you felt that if you could have, if you were able to read and write, that you would have been able to fight your case?
Yes, ma'am. Because when I sit in prison, I couldn't write anybody. I couldn't ask nobody for help. Even my lawyer, I told him what happened that night, and he basically forced me to plead guilty to the case. He was like, "Who do you think they're gonna believe, you or this white woman?" He said, "These folks gonna give you." He was black. He was a black lawyer. He said, "Man, if you go tell these people that you didn't rape this woman, they're going to give you a life sentence." He said, "But if you sign these papers, right now you can go home." I said, "So if I sign these papers, I can go home?" And he said, "Yeah, you can go home." And then I went to the judge and I asked the judge, "How do you spell under duress?" Because I felt like they was making me do something I didn't want to do. And the judge got mad at me. And they told me that I had to sign them papers or they weren't going to let me go home. So I signed the papers saying that me and that guy raped that woman. Me being young and uneducated, I didn't know what to believe. I was a kid that believed in Perry Mason. If you did the crime, you're going to go to jail or prison. If you didn't do it, well, then you don't have nothing to worry about. So that I was in a fantasy world. That's what I believed in. But even they have never even compensated me. All they did was just after the DNA proved that me and that other guy didn't rape that woman, they just basically because of the DNA, they just dropped the case. And then they didn't even do my medical. That's how I lost my eyesight because I was in prison. And I have glaucoma, and I had it in prison, and they never told me I had it. And by the time I got out, and the doctors in the world caught it, it was too late. They did me wrong. That's the only thing I can say. I'm just grateful that the truth is finally out.
Yeah, me too, Ronald.
If,
Well,
if,
thank
if
you
I
for.
died tomorrow, I'd be happy if I just help somebody and not make the same mistakes or go down the same road that I've been on.
Well, I hope you can find some happiness. Thanks, Ronald. A cop for 33 years in Houston, Michael Egbert was handpicked to go to Bosnia to work for the UN. It was the chance and now the story of a lifetime. American cop in Bosnia.
The Bosnia just finished with a long time civil war after Tito, their leader, died, and the Serbs and everybody they were all fighting over territory and whatever, and so a civil war erupted. Under Tito's regime, what kept him in power all those years was he allowed the law enforcement people to pretty much do whatever they wanted to do, terrorizing the public, kind of like the KGB did in Russia or the Gestapo did in Nazi Germany. And the people are terrified of them because people just disappear, and the law enforcement was run by a bunch of thugs. That's what it amounted to. Once the Civil War was finally over with or declared over, they wanted to go in and revamp their whole entire law enforcement system by getting rid of the old socialist style that they were using and institute a democratic style like what we had here in the States and pretty much around the world. English was a universal language, so I had an edge against a lot of the other people that was working there. So it wasn't long after I arrived in Bosnia that I was put into a position of in administration to handle the personnel coming in to Bosnia. So I gained a position of importance because I was given the power to hire interpreters and civilian personnel and stuff like this.
Anybody who came into the country, like Princess Diana, these heads of state, you got.
Yeah, without a doubt, she was the most famous person I actually met was Princess Diana shortly before she was killed in Paris. She had this thing about the minefields out there and how they were so indiscriminately killing people,
Right.
especially children and stuff like that. They're out there playing and they blow themselves up and whatever. Even though my meeting with her was only very brief, maybe 5 minutes at the most, I met her. It was really quite a thrill.
You were able to actually bring people over here to the United States and get them jobs and help them immigrate?
Yes, I made some contacts with the American Embassy there in Sarajevo, and they were able to help me cut through a lot of the red tape that these people were having to go through because they were still being treated like it was back in the days of communism because they needed to have exit visas to be granted to them by their government before they would be allowed to immigrate. So I was making some contact. What happened was one of our interpreters, he had gotten his family out during the Civil War, and they went to Australia, his wife and his kids, and he'd been trying to get to them all this time for several years, and he kept being told no. One day he just stood there in front of his station commander's office and committed suicide. Oh. And I heard about it because this was in my region, and I thought, well, I didn't know the guy, but still it affected me. And I contacted the embassy in Sarajevo and said, something's very wrong with this picture. I need some help. And so anyway, the ambassador, a woman, she made contact with the people in Belgrade, their embassy there. And next thing I know, they couldn't do enough for us. Wow. But I was able to get several families able to immigrate. One family went to Norfolk, Virginia, and another one went to Australia. I was able to cut all that red tape and get them their visas that they needed so they could immigrate.
That's probably better than meeting Princess Diana.
Yeah, I felt that one year was my most fulfilling year in my entire law enforcement career. I think I felt like I was actually doing something.
Well, is there anything better than that? Thanks, Michael. Jay Lopez is a master parachute rigger and free fall instructor for the U.S. Army in Yuma, Arizona. So writing a book entitled The Adventures of Tutu the Flying Chipmunk didn't really surprise anyone, did it?
Yeah, it did inspire. I think more than that, though, is just my travels around the world. I've been contracted to work in numerous countries, and just being around the world and just seeing people and hearing their stories, it just kind of inspired me to to write a concept of follow a dream, you know.
Okay.
So the book is about a chipmunk, and this little chipmunk he sees these flying squirrels, and he's inspired by the idea of them flying, and he's just like he wants to be like them. So what the book is about is mainly perseverance, I suppose. He wants to be a flying squirrel, but the reality of it is he's a chipmunk. So the flying squirrels, they're born with wings, so they're able to fly. So my little chipmunk, his name is Tutu. The book is a journey of basically how is he going to accomplish that without having been born with wings. So of course he's going to get a lot of static, I guess you could call it, from other characters, because they're just like, you're a chipmunk, you're supposed to be gathering nuts or something, but you're not supposed to fly. You weren't born with wings. I think about people, humans. There was a point in time when flying wasn't a reality yet. The Wright brothers created that. Skydiving wasn't a reality. Somebody created that. So there was that one person somewhere in time that created a reality that people said couldn't be done. And that's what this chipmunk does in the book.
So he finds a way to live his dream.
Basically, for the most part, I mean, I don't want to give the book away. There's multiple sections of it. But I guess the readers will have to see.
So it's not a children's book, or it is?
It's funny because the publisher, when I talked to the publisher about it, I told them it was a children's book, and then when I sent it over to them, they were like, "This is a novel." they thought it was like 10 pages long or something. The book is like 244 pages, I believe.
Okay.
They went ahead and classified it as a 9 years old read level and up, and on emotional level as well. The book. One of the things I wanted to instill in the book are a lot of life lessons, because the reality of following a dream is that it can be really, really tough. There can be times when you want to give up. There's going to be, just stuff along the way. If it's in the skydiving side of things, you might get hurt. There's a possibility of that and or past that. So it's for anybody 9 and up. Anybody that's an adult that's like me. I'm more than an adult. I'm a grandpa. I'm way up there, but I'm still a kid at heart. So I think anybody that still has that kid in heart, in them, they would love this book.
So how are you telling people about it?
So currently, I'm still working on my marketing strategy. However, I think it's going to be a good one. I have already gotten the okay from a elementary school to basically do what they call demo jump. So I bought a costume, and I'm going to be skydiving into schools with my costume, and then giving kind of an author visit, but coming from the sky.
You're going to skydive in a chipmunk outfit?
Yes.
That is something else. So are you going to get little chipmunks made, like little stuffed chipmunks that you can hand out with your book?
Things of that nature. Yes. Yeah. Yep.
You really are?
Yep. Yes, I am actually.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm actually taking a piece of the book. I'm actually recreating this theme. The only difference is that I can't find a hawk big enough to fly on, whereas a chipmunk could. So I'm gonna have to use an actual airplane. I just people won't see the airplane. But I am actually using an actual scene from my book to recreate my flying into a school. It's an actual scene from the book. Yeah.
Okay, so do me a favor. Let me know when you're headed east, because I got to see this. All right, we got to take a quick break, but we're coming right back. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you: printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
We're back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. What started out as a plot with one character morphed into something completely different over the last decade as Samer Abu Khalid watched our country become increasingly divided, and the end result is his book, The Rage, A Ravaged Soul.
The purpose of the book is really just to teach the reader what it's like to lose the semblance of human soul based on the actions of a few people. After 2016, you saw the political turmoil that was going on in the world.
Right.
And you saw the divisions that were stoked between people. And when I saw the similarities between my story and what was going on in the world, you basically see a lot of the worst in people and how that sort of culminates over a period of time. So you have an individual character who, after his uncle killed his father out of greed to take over the family business, which is a conglomerate, a worldwide conglomerate, that really was the culmination of how he lost his own soul.
This sounds like Succession, right?
It is, and that's the problem, though. The problem is that the character himself was very genuine. He was very pure, and over time, he sort of loses his faith in humanity. So he has this question as if he can't even trust his own family. Who really does he rely on? So as he sort of grows, the degradation of his soul leads to the personification of this demonic figure called the Rage. And that's the title of the book. It's not an emotion, it's an entity. So the rage itself is the possession of his soul. And it sort of manifests itself into this monster that sort of takes over this character and really takes him into this abyss where he loses who he is and basically loses his true north. That entity brings together 7 people from across the globe, basically through the actions of this one family.
Your book is described as a tale of revenge and redemption, the fates of 7 talented martial artists from across the globe.
Yes.
Intertwined over the course of 16 years, so this goes on.
It starts in 2003 and it ends in 2019. The second book, basically, it goes into what happens the year following the events of this book. And then the finale is basically how it all ties up and what happens when these 7 individuals sort of, come to the end of their respective journeys. I want the readers to understand that the degradation of the human soul can happen anywhere, to anybody, and at any time. That's one of the reasons that they are sort of tied in together. It's basically the actions of human beings and, how far their soul would degrade to the point where it would have long-lasting consequences of everybody in the world. And so in 2016, when I saw what was going on and people pitting up against each other, family, neighbors, friends, this is what inspired me to write it. I felt like there was no other time like the present because there were so many similarities. So I'm doing a lot of word of mouth and then also a lot of social media. So Twitter, Facebook, also on Goodreads.
Okay.
People love the idea of what the message is and how it sort of relates to what we're seeing in the everyday world. A lot of people like the way that, you look at a story, you see people who ordinarily you wouldn't associate with one another at all. They're just so different in who they are as people and their personalities and how they live their everyday lives. Right. And having them come together because of an impact in the world. So one tragic event brings together 7 people from across the globe. It's long reaching. And I always said that, eventually, the more that we give in to, the worst part of us, the more it doesn't impact only us and those closest to us, but it starts to have a ripple effect across the globe as well. And you see that every day with world leaders, with celebrities and things of that nature. People who have lost their soul generally have an impact on the world, indirectly or directly. And that's the story I'm trying to tell here. In this case, you sort of take something as pure and as organic and as ancient as martial arts and find a way to make that the center of the story and really, sort of warp it to, someone or eventually these collective people's own way of either making things right in the world or further, fueling their own agenda.
Certainly something to think about. Thank you, Samer. Dr. Darren Lovick is a neurosurgeon who started writing The Pier about 25 years ago. A third of the book was written while he was on medical mission trips in Ethiopia and Nicaragua. And then in the last couple of years, he finally finished it. Isn't it interesting when you write a book over an extended period of time?
The vantage point of the book has changed so much, as you kind of move through life. It's kind of interesting how it looks different each time you write it. I wrote this story for my kids. So I have 3 teenagers, and we see a lot of bad things in neurosurgery and think at some point I'm probably not going to be around. and how can I, pass on some lessons you've learned to your kids. And it's a main character. He's unnamed. There's no proper names in the entire book. And it's about a young man who's walking into his life, basically. But when he walks into his life, the setting is he's walking down a pier into the sea. And as he, walks down this pier, he meets different characters and beasts that he has to confront and fight. When I wrote the book, you kind of spend your whole life looking at the world and how the world sees you, but the story is about really what kind of lives inside you. And that's kind of the message I had for my kids and for the message of the book. He meets men and women of varying ages who try and persuade and dissuade him into different actions that he tries to avoid. Some he falls trap into, and how he has to get himself out of these predicaments. For instance, at the pier, this young man is meeting 4 different old men. They're looking out into the sea, and out in the sea is a vile dragon that he has to try and confront. And each 4 men has a different way of fighting the dragon or living beneath it. And he has to find a way around that or to battle this beast to move on in life. The book is full of paradox. I mean, life is full of paradox, at least in my experience, that things you have to do to overcome challenges sometimes are exactly the opposite of what you think you have to do. And that's kind of the messages of the book.
Is that things aren't always what they appear to be?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So the people he meets in the book, like in a lot of stories and a lot in life, you meet somebody who you think may be sort of inconsequential in your life, but turns out to be very powerful or changes your direction in an unseen way, and not discount those interactions. There's some lines in the book like this. Like one is, several people are dying, and there's an old man in the book who is destitute, who has really nothing. He's homeless, but he says it doesn't matter how you die or what happens to you because you don't really get to choose. The choice is, how you're going to react to the situation and overcome it or have some dignity in how you handle it.
Nice.
The book I wrote for charity. Many proceeds all go to charity to kind of feed the hungry and shelter the homeless. That's what it's all about. And kind of when I saw these people in Nicaragua and Ethiopia, but we have a lot of hungry and unsheltered people here in the United States that need help, and that's what the book is written for. So it's not for me. It's kind of for a bigger purpose.
Darren, I hope you sell 1 million copies. Finally, Richard Cruz was with 3M Company for 37 years, and one of his last assignments was to develop a business plan for NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement that we've been hearing so much about lately. So to say this guy is an expert on industrial sales in America would be an understatement. That's the name of his book, with the subtitle, Understanding and Planning for Sustainable Growth.
Every business, seeks and desires year-on-year growth. But in sustaining that in a mature and evolving markets like we have in the United States requires more than just products or simply placing more resources on the street. So it's ever more critical that marketing and field selling organizations have a solid understanding of those behaviors that drive the decision-making process. Equally important is, management's responsibility to set realistic and meaningful expectations, create a positive and respectful work environment while providing tools to decrease the customer's decision-making process, to basically compress the selling process. And that's what this is about.
What's the most important thing? What your book says, understanding and planning for sustainable growth. What's the number one thing they need to do?
Well, I think there's several things that are important. I took over the Western region for the industrial business, and the reason I took it over is because it had been flat for 4 years. I took it over, and in 6 months, I took it to double-digit growth. And basically what I did is I wanted the representatives to have a solid understanding of what their role is and what the expectations are and how they're going to achieve it. So let's start first with the forecast. So let's say they have a $2 million territory. There's an 8% forecast. So if you have $2 million in business and you have to increase it by, 8%, where do your numbers have to be at the end of the year? Well, 8% of $2 million is $160,000. So the representative would think that, well, I have to be at $2,160,000 to meet forecast. And I would say no, because you're going to have 4, 5, 6% attrition. You're going to lose business. 4% of that, that's another $80,000. So what you really need, you have to end is $240,000 worth of new business. So what are the new opportunities that you have? And so maybe they would have, let's say, $300,000 worth of new opportunities that they've identified. But the reality is they only close about 40% of that business. History tells us. Okay? But that was never taken into consideration. I brought that to everybody's attention. So the whole forecast process changed. So bringing that recognition to their attention was very important. One of the other things that was important is that, they understand that during this whole process, you also have to work with your distributor partners. But they didn't fully understand the distributors. There's a lot of different roles that distributors play. One could be take the credit risk. One would be provide a local source of supply. But you also have to keep in mind, the company had competitors within the warehouses of these distributors. And what drives their behavior, many of them, is margin. Usually manufacturers' representatives like ourselves, they had a variable compensation, and much of it was a salary, and then a fraction of it was a bonus, at the end of a quarter. Well, with distributor representatives, they get paid on the margin. So they're going to sell the products that, are going to be less expensive and easier to sell. So in the eyes of our competitors, their customer is the distributor. So they don't have to have a large organization to cover the country.
Right.
Those are things that people have to recognize.
A lot of companies could probably use your expertise because they've taken a hit, right? Because of
Yes,
COVID.
absolutely.
And they
No
have to get
question
back
about
on
it.
their feet, and they probably have to find streamlined ways of doing business.
Without wasting time
Without,
and money.
yeah.
And, a sales call today could be $500 for each sales call. So you don't want that time wasted.
Right.
You want that to be very, very effective time that is used. It's not only business managers, but also students.
Oh, absolutely. I think you'd be a great resource for business majors. Richard, thank you so much. And that's a wrap for this edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Thank you so much for being with us. And make sure, tell your friends and family to download the podcast at 710WOR.com, especially if they have a book to write. I mean, did you hear these people tonight? We had a neurosurgeon on. Come on. You don't have time to write? I think you do. And maybe even a secret desire to be on the Page Publishing Book Club. I mean, who doesn't? Come on. Listen, a new year's coming. It's your year to tell your story, all right? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Catch you next time.